I can't quite see the screen.
Yes.
I see Bill, yeah.
Okay, I think we've got everybody at this point. Thank you, everybody, being on time. Okay, I will, at this point, call to order the Thursday, October 14th, 2021 meeting of the North Andover Community Preservation Committee. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, this meeting will be conducted via remote means. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with a right and/or requirement to attend this meeting. I'm sorry, was I supposed to count you down first? Are you good? Okay. Okay, good. Can be found on the town's website at www.northandoverma.gov. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so on their televisions by tuning to Comcast Channel 8, Verizon Channel 26, or online at northandovercam.org. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, with exceptions, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so for reasons of economic hardship and despite best efforts, we'll post on the town website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. If the public would like to participate in the public meeting, please email your questions or comments prior to or during the meeting to dbeckley@northandoverma.gov. The question or comment will be provided to the committee before the meeting or read during the proceedings if received shortly during or shortly before the meeting. Dan, make a note, we probably need to find ways to amend this language a little bit to reflect how we are actually operating in a hybrid model. So I don't know what we're required to do. Okay, first order of business is to simply approve the minutes from last meeting. Can I get a motion?
Motion to approve the minutes as drafted.
Motion made by Rick. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Tim. All those in favor? Jack and John cannot vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, I have it as unanimous. Great. All right, next item on the agenda. We have Mr. Eugene Willis is here to discuss some existing land that he has and potential sale to the town for protection. Mr.
Okay.
Willis?
Thank you for the opportunity. This property's been in my family since the 60s. It abuts a 700-acre Charles Ward reservation. In the early 80s, I created a 1,000-sapling black walnut plantation up there, and it's through the Conservation Commission. It's permitted to plant, maintain, and harvest, and I've been maintaining it ever since then. Today, there's but plus or minus 200 straight, clear tree logs for harvest that are probably 10, 20, maybe 30 years from maturity. I don't know, but they're not ready yet, but they'll be worth some money when they do mature. My and my wife Catherine's intent was to leave the land and trees to our children. My wife passed away in 2003, and my children have moved to the West Coast. They have no interest in the land. I intend to relocate in the next year or two. There's no longer a reason for me to retain ownership. Our wish is that the town purchase the property and would like to work with the committee to see if that can happen. The land contains more than 20 acres and is on town sewer, so therefore it qualifies under the continuing care retirement community rules and regulations for subdivision. In 2015, I came before this board and requested a grant, but was not recommended for approval. At the time, the appraised value was $3.8 million. I submitted a certified appraisal by AM Appraisal Services Incorporated of Lexington. The appraisal at the time was for only 2 parcels. Now, let me back up and give you a description of the property. I don't know if the camera can do this, and you have a PDF on that, or if you can see this here, what works for you guys to be able to understand what I'm doing.
Dan, would you be able to present the plot plan on your screen?
Yeah, I can do that.
Thank you.
We can actually see it as well on,
Can you
on
see
the,
it? Can
You're
you
able to
see
see it,
the
Tracy?
paper copy?
yeah, you can
Okay.
see it actually
Great.
on the CAM meetings part of it, video. I don't know what it's called.
Okay.
Where it says, where CAM's part of the meeting. I can see it anyway.
Got it. Okay, great.
Okay, so we can go over here? Okay,
Yeah,
good.
absolutely, yep.
We'll do it the old-fashioned way with paper. All right, so this is Boston Street, 114's over here. This is Boston Hill Road, small short road with 3 houses on it. The the Locust Parcel abuts off of that. The original appraisal back in 2015 contained these two parcels of land. I think it was approximately 28 acres, okay? And it contained these same 4 multi-unit buildings. They were designed for a CRC, continuing care community. So that was back in 2015, this appraisal is here. So the property runs from Gray Street. There's a street, it's called Style Street. It's a way, but it's not a public way, it's not paved. I don't know if it's a public way or what that definition is, but you can walk on it, there's power lines running down. In 2003, we came in front of the planning board, and they approved the subdivision of this lot. And that's why it shows a cul-de-sac, little cul-de-sac here. So the board has the PDF of the approval, which said it waived construction of this road because I wanted to build a house for my brother right here. But it said if any further development happens out back here, this road has to be constructed. And to that, Public Works made us bring a water main in and a hydrant to this point. So that's in place, but the subdivision road wasn't built. But it is recorded, it's approved. And so our envisionment is off of this cul-de-sac to have frontage for one lot and develop it as a CRC. Now, this new proposal adds this 6.2 acre parcel, which wasn't, because the original proposal showed coming in Boston Hill Road. Now we're not doing that. We're going to access off of Gray Street. When we met with Jeannie and town engineer said he didn't want a cul-de-sac and a public road. He wanted this to be private all the way out. We said, whatever you guys want. So that's what we're showing. It would be one lot, all combined, and then a private road all the way in to service the units. Now, the thing about this 6.2 acre parcel here, if you see here, this is the trustees of the reservation land, 700 acres, Charles Ward. This hatched property are the 3 parcels that I'm bringing to the board now. This other hatch is another private owner, the Locust brothers. It's 14 acres of land. The only access to that land is across this property. So by acquiring this property, you're also getting the access rights to this property. Otherwise, that's just a wood lot. So that's a backup on what we're, a little bit of history, and this is a bigger, more detailed section of what would happen. So again, here's Gray Road. Here's Gray Road. This was the subdivision cul-de-sac design. Instead, it would be a 24-foot private road all the way through. Come up here is the matchway. This land over here is the Locust brothers' land. We'd come in here, and this is just conceptual. These buildings could be located somewhere else, but just to show that they would fit, and that's it. So I've hired Lillian Montalto to sell it for us, and she's here to say a few words if you want. And then I intend to hire an appraiser to go out and get the appraisal you guys would need. We'd like to work with you. I mean, I prefer the town to own it, but like I say, we're leaving and it's going to be sold, okay? Thanks for your time. Lillian, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, sure. I just wanted.
This is Lillian Montalto from Signature Properties in Andover.
Hi, guys. Good evening. I just wanted to come tonight with Mr. Willis so you could put a face with a name if you had any questions. They are going to be moving to the West Coast in the near future. He certainly would love to see the town acquire the property if that's something that is feasible in the future. We will be getting, I think you have a copy of the previous appraisal. If not, we certainly would be happy to make that available to you. We will be hiring one of the 4 companies that I believe you had suggested to Jean previously to do an updated appraisal. We're going to hire them in the next couple of weeks to update it. 2015 was a totally different market than what we're in right now today. We'll have it appraised. I've reached out to several companies. We've worked with a couple of national companies in the continuing care retirement business. But before we did that, we wanted to approach the town first, because that certainly is Mr. Willis's preference. Just wanted to present myself or introduce myself to you this evening. I've been in this area for about 40 years, so I know some of you, not personally, but I think you probably know my name, so happy to work closely with you in the future. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me.
Thank you. I would say, probably appreciate you coming in and letting us know of your intentions. So is your intention to submit an application for CPC for this year?
Yes, I'd like to.
Okay.
I'd like to. So what we envision is a website and try to garner public support and all of that. And we'd like committee input. We're working with Daniel. We need to, show you what you guys could do. Just off the top of my head, as far as, I don't know but you could come down and do, I don't know if you want, we could give you some proposals of what, but I'm thinking this land here is flat. My first off the top would be to access this parking lot here, and then over here, ball fields, because it's better terrain. And I was thinking if you came in through here, some parking, and then maybe public gardens, like where you rototill and let people get plots of quarter acre or something, grow their own. It's wide open, but we'll kick that around, and like I said, I want to set up a website, and we'll be talking back and forth. But it's a fairly big number. I didn't want to come in front of you in April and say, hey, fellas, this is what we're looking at, and give you a heads up, and you can kick it around.
Certainly not. It's always good for us to know what projects are coming before us. The more advanced notice we have as possible. And there's really not much for us to discuss or debate tonight because there's not an application before us. But,
right.
Certainly do appreciate you coming in, sharing this information and the thought that went behind it. But
it's just informational.
Yep.
That's all it was. And I appreciate the time. Okay?
Understood. Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks, you too. Thank you. Okay. Ready to move on to the next order of business? Everyone's good? Andrew Shapiro is joining us tonight to discuss the rail trail. We'll give us an update on the project that we funded last year, and I think discuss maybe some of the challenges they had not getting the grant. So, Andrew, you're with us?
I'm right here. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, and thank you also for accommodating me in a virtual format too. And yes, as you mentioned, and can everybody hear me okay, by the way?
You're a little light, but.
Oh, I don't know if that's my earbuds or, are you hearing me better now? If I speak up a little bit?
I'm good.
Okay, we're good. Excellent. So as you mentioned, Mr. Chair, we were unsuccessful, unfortunately, in getting a Mass Trails grant, even though we thought we put forth a valiant effort to do so. The original application before the CPC, which it graciously approved and was approved at town meeting, was to match the funds that we were pursuing through that Mass Trails grant. And just to refresh everybody's memory, the grant we were going for would have been $83,000. The funding the CPC approved was $30,900 for a project total of $113,900. So where we're at right now is we wanted to get a better sense for the total amount of funding we'd need to do the design engineering for this. And we wanted to get an opinion of a professional engineer. So what we did was we reached out to a contact that I had over at Stantec. Stantec is an international engineering firm. They have a lot of experience in designing and helping to guide the process of building out rail trail projects. They worked with several municipalities throughout the Merrimack Valley and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts on these types of projects, including Newburyport, Salisbury, Boxford, Georgetown, Newbury, Groveland, Haverhill, Amesbury, and more. So working with them, in my opinion, would have been a natural sort of inclination on my part to see what they thought about this. Their trail team currently has over 20 trail projects in the planning, design, or construction phase. They're on DCR's on-call. They're DCR's on-call engineer for trail design. The trails mentioned that I mentioned before, the different communities, they were all community designed, and they are MassDOT constructed. So that leads me to the next point here. For projects of this size, Stantec has advised us that the project would most likely have to be funded through MassDOT. And so MassDOT has a very long and winding process to sort of initiate funding. They have a project initiation process divided into 3 parts. Part 1 of the process, and the first step of securing what's known as Transportation Improvement Program funding, TIP, would be to complete a project need form and submit it to the MassDOT District 4 office through the Massachusetts Project Intake Tool. So there's a lot of technical jargon I'm throwing at you, but long story short, we got a proposal from Stantec that they're proposing to help us through that initial phase of work. They would help us produce materials and go to MassDOT and coordinate with our regional partner as well, the Merrimack Valley Planning Commission, would also help us through the project. And their proposal, which I believe, Dan, included in your packets, totals $17,690. And so in my view, I think proceeding in utilizing the CPC dollars that were allocated for this project for this purpose would be in the same spirit of what was initially approved, which was fund the starting of the design process. But we just wanted to make sure you were aware of that, and if there were any concerns from any of the members or the committee as a whole, we certainly want to address that. And if the committee didn't feel as though, if they didn't agree with me that it was in the spirit and wanted to have us take another route, we could certainly do that. But that's what I'm bringing forward to you tonight. So I don't know if anybody has any questions about that. I'm happy to answer or discuss anything.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, I think I'll kind of take it around the room here and see if anyone has any questions. I have a couple thoughts myself. Maybe Bill, we'll start with you.
Sure. So directionally, does this mean I followed you until the Mass DOT part? So does this mean that Mass DOT we would kind of get in the queue and say, Mass DOT, we'd like you to do this with state money at some point in the future? Is that how it would go? Yes.
So I'll just give a sort of an example here. So I'm sure folks in the room know of the project to improve the Route 114 corridor. That project is being funded through the TIP program. So this would be the same program. And this program does fund many rail trail projects throughout the state in different regions. And the reason why it's critical to utilize TIP funding in this particular case is because we're planning to do this as a 10-foot wide, basically bituminous asphalt rail trail, like a shared use path, not like a lighter grass trail. Gravel, yeah. And because of the complex nature of doing that, it's a much more complex type of construction project. It typically requires a higher design cost and, of course, a higher construction cost. And MassDOT typically assists in those matters. So, and I did have some concerns when initially hearing this, because this is what Stantec was advising us, because a lot of the funding is tied up over the next few years, both between the projects I mentioned before that's going on here in North Andover on Route 114, and also a lot of money is being allocated to a rebuild of Route 1 through Salisbury. But he advised me that he knows that they know that, They have a very good relationship with MassDOT, and they still think that that we should get this in the queue. I don't know if that answered your question, Bill.
Yeah, no, that
Okay.
really did, I guess.
Okay.
Tracy, any questions from you?
No, actually, Andrew and Bill's questions answered. Thank you, Andrew.
Sure.
Jack?
Yes, I do have a question. Just like to understand the outreach to private owners that are identified as owning part of that corridor. It looks like there's about a third of a mile, especially out toward Marble Ridge Road, that are private owners. And I guess what's the status? Has outreach to those property owners been done? And you know, really, where do we stand on that?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Jack. You're right. There are a few different owners along this stretch. You know, we're going to have to deal with the bigger property. I mean, the bigger property owners in terms of entities are definitely the trustees of reservations, and we're going to have to also deal with National Grid because they control some of the right of way that we want to access. But there are also other private property owners. I'm actually going to quickly defer to Dan, and although Dan is not the sponsor of this application, Dan did a lot of the legwork because he actually authored our grant application to the Mass Trails program. So Dan, do you want to talk about a little of the work you did in terms of outreach and maybe you know, any follow-up you'd expect we might do with Stantec if we were able to utilize this funding for that purpose?
Yeah, so for the Mass Trails grant, I did reach out to National Grid and the major private property owner you were referencing by Marble Ridge Road. National Grid has worked with a lot of other towns on rail trail projects along their right-of-way. They certainly have concerns about it, and it is an intensive review. They won't approve a project until there is full engineering design plans available for them to review. So really their only request was, we will look at these when you have engineering design, and if we have any concerns, we can work together to adjust those. So National Grid doesn't work with you up front. You have to work through the process first. The trustees of reservations was very supportive, and owns land around the right of way that it would allow for certain alternatives, and would allow for avoiding certain properties that are on the right of way. And the half mile stretch near Marble Ridge Road, that property owner was generally supportive. National Grid does own or does have a easement through there, and so they would still need to have input because it's close to their infrastructure. And of course, none of them were saying, go ahead, do whatever you want. They would still be engaged throughout the process. They would want to have input. But we did get letters of support from a number of the property owners who would be affected. Additionally, not in this first phase that Stantec is proposing, but in later phases, there will be property owner outreach. In this phase, there will be deed research and things like that to ensure we are contacting the correct property owners and determining where property lines are and things like that. And then there's more feasibility engagement work in the next steps later on. And in addition to that, in this step, part of it is coming up with alternatives to the original design, which was something we did in the Mass Trails and CPC application. And so, you know, in worst case scenarios where, you know, a property owner doesn't want it, you know, on or near their property, we did look at a number of cases where it could be a shared use path along the street, or it could cut along town or trustees' property. So we do have alternatives, and those will be a part of the design process, and we did do outreach and will continue to do that.
Great.
So just, that sound good, Jack? I mean, just to put a bow on it, you know, this is a very iterative process, and it's one of those things where it's like, you know, it's somewhat chicken and egg insofar as until you have an engineer on board working with you to sort of workshop how this needs to go, it's difficult to do the level of meaningful stakeholder and property owner outreach that's necessary, because that engineer is going to be able to work with us on ensuring that whatever alternatives need to be put into place, they can work with that, or, you know, work with the property owner on whatever, if there's an easement that needs to be worked out, they can help us with that. And as Dan mentioned, Stantec can help us with deed research as well. So that can be part of our ultimate scope when we start to work with them. So.
Makes sense, Andrew. Thank you, Dan.
Okay, I'll go around the room here. Tim, any questions?
Andrew, what's the original budget, overall budget for the project, or is that to be determined based on the study that Stantec is going to do and try to push it through?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the initial thought on the budget, or the initial budget we had scoped out was, you know, in line with, you know, our original application to the CPC. So we were projecting about $113,900. I think Dan had sort of consulted with our internal, you know, some folks at DPW, our town engineer, to sort of think about how much money we would want to plan for this. We were probably a bit off, and I think we were, you know, now that our eyes are a little bit more open to this more comprehensive MassDOT process, it's going to probably cost more money to design and plan the project. Stantec anecdotally told us this project resembles the work they did or have been doing in Georgetown, and designing that project was about $300,000. And then in terms of the construction side, he advised, the engineer there advised that it's typically, and granted, these are very crude and very broad numbers, but he advised it's about $1 million per mile in construction. And in this first phase, we were talking about 1.3 miles. So we're looking at somewhere in the order of magnitude of $1.3 million. Of course, given everything that's going on right now in the world of construction, who knows where that's going to be in a couple of years, when and if we're in a position to move forward. So there's a lot of work to be done for sure. It definitely costs a lot of money. And as I said before, it's an iterative process. It's gonna, I mean, we're probably gonna be back before you guys a couple more times, at least, to discuss this as it moves forward. But the hope is that all that hard work pays off and we get a beautiful rail trail that everybody can enjoy. So.
How much $3 million or $1.3 million might be paid for by Mass DOT, TIP? Do you know?
Yeah. I mean, typically, a lot of it, like, you know, in the case of, when you look at, for instance, the Route 114 project, the town itself is not putting any money into that. So it's not unreasonable to think that the entirety of the project will be funded that way. It's not to say that that'll be the case for this rail trail, but I know that, you know, the MassDOT is very supportive of rail trail projects. Put it that way.
Okay. John, any questions, comments?
Yeah, and to follow up on Tim's question of the overall funding, the TIP program, it seems odd to me that it includes, you know, major road building projects and rail trails. Aren't they like separate areas? I mean, how do they come out of the same pot of money? That intuitively, that doesn't seem right.
Yeah, I can see. Yeah, I mean, I understand your skepticism, John. I appreciate it. I just, even in the on-road or the roadway projects, a large component of them is integrating complete streets design standards and solutions. So for like the Route 114 project, they are actually building or plan to build or have designed, and they're only at 25% design at this point, but they're planning on putting in a 10-foot wide shared use path along the side of the road. So in essence, that's kind of like a rail trail, although, you know, albeit, you know, parallel to the roadway. So it is consistent in terms of they are trying to fund projects that encourage all users. So not only vehicle traffic, mass transit, but also bicycles and pedestrians. When you think about all these other communities that have started to connect their rail trails to one another, it's just another mean and method to connect different communities to one another that doesn't necessarily require vehicles or on-street vehicles. So that's it. Without being an actual MassDOT official, that's my best answer for that.
So, okay,
just-
fair enough.
oh.
Still seems off, but that's, you know, that's the way the state rolls, I guess. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking to feed a little off of your question, John. Andrew, I mean, but isn't part of the possibility of the state doing what they may or may not do on 114 due to the possible private development that's going to happen there? I mean, are we convoluting the two? I mean, I'm kind of with John. I don't get how the rail trails and what's going to happen on 114 line up, unless it's because of the possible private development that's going to happen on 114.
Let me be very clear. They are mutually exclusive, those two.
Okay.
So the project to build 114 is going to happen regardless of any potential redevelopment across from Merrimack College.
So
one
then
doesn't
our
automatically need the other.
private, I guess my point is, I just wanted to make sure, like, the private, whether it's a private development putting money into the area or a community preservation putting money into something like the rail trails, it's not going to be dependent upon that. I probably didn't frame that appropriately, but
Yeah, no,
I
no,
think you
it's
get my
not.
gist.
I
Okay.
do, and no, they're not dependent on one another.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I just had one other small question. We didn't get the initial grant. The initial grant was just for engineering, right? I mean, it wasn't for any kind of construction. Correct.
That's correct.
And do we know why we didn't get it?
So we haven't had a detailed conversation with Mass Trails. Dan, did you talk to Mass Trails? I have a response to it anyway, but did you talk to Mass Trails and get a specific feedback from them by chance?
I didn't get specific feedback. I know there was less money this year than there has been in previous years and more applicants. And they were prioritizing construction ready projects. So engineering design was not top priority.
And I would just add on to this, and this was information that we had gotten when we consulted with a staff member at the Merrimack Valley Planning Commission, who sort of has her eye on a lot of the projects that go on in the region. She just told us anecdotally that Mass Trails tends not to fund portions of these more ambitious rail trail projects that like the 10-foot wide shared use path, hard path. They tend to do the soft path rail trails, ones that are, like I said before, grass or what is it? Not gravel, but like the
Stone dust.
Stone dust path, exactly. Which tend to be lower in construction costs, both in terms of planning, design, and the actual construction.
Okay, no, it's fine, thank you.
Rick, any questions?
Andrew, I have a couple of questions. In terms of being placed in the queue for MassDOT, you mentioned that that queue can be long, and my experience with MassDOT is it sometimes takes quite a while for funding for projects. Did Stantec give you any idea as to how long they think that project may be in the queue?
I don't recall. I don't have a sense on how long it would take. But let me just clarify one thing. Just because we carry this through these initial phases with MassDOT doesn't necessarily mean we're going to wait around for MassDOT to fund this project. So I think, regardless of anything going on with MassDOT, this is going to be a helpful exercise for us because we're going to move toward, facilitating design and engineering drawings for the rail trail. And if the ultimate result of that is, it's going to take too long for MassDOT to even consider it on the back end for construction, or they don't want to do that, then we can seek alternative means and methods for construction, but we'll have those design drawings in hand, which will help us. And maybe that'll better position us for things like a Mass Trails grant in the future, because to Dan's point, you know, it seems like they were more eager to fund shovel-ready projects, and I would consider it to be shovel-ready after we have full design drawings and buy-in from all stakeholders.
So with respect to your alternatives then, is it, am I correct that Stantec is going to proceed with the intent that this would be up to Mass DOT standards for the rail trail construction?
Yes, and in fact, they say that specifically in their proposal.
Now, how much involvement does Mass DOT have, if any, during the design, or is it just a case where Stantec is going to prepare the design in accordance with what they're having generally done for rail trails, and then present it to Mass DOT if in fact it were to get into the queue and actually be funded?
I think they're going to have a fair bit of involvement insofar as, you know, this whole first phase is essentially providing the information to MassDOT, initial information to say, should we take this further in our MassDOT review process? Are you interested in getting this in the queue? Can we work with you? So short answer, I'd say yes, they're going to be involved.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Terry?
Are there any other communities around us that have used, how have they funded the trails? Because those are, some of them are very nice.
Yeah, so the reason I reached out to Stantec, I reached out to them for two reasons. First of all, I have a personal relationship with an engineer over there who I've worked with in the past, and I think highly of their work. But number two, I happen to live in Newburyport. I use the Newburyport Rail Trail all the time. I love it. They have a few different phases. The project was started by an engineering firm that was absorbed by Stantec. So Stantec has the project team that was involved with development and build out of the Newburyport Rail Trail. And I think I mentioned earlier in my statement, they've worked with numerous communities throughout the region, and I'll just mention them again. In addition to the Newburyport, Salisbury, Boxford, Georgetown, Newbury, Groveland, Haverhill, Amesbury. So certainly they're very familiar with the Merrimack Valley, our neighboring communities, including Boxford, whom I just mentioned, Haverhill, and others. So we're really confident that they, A, know what they're doing process-wise, design-wise, but B, that anything that comes out of this as a work product would integrate well into the rail trail network in the region. So that's why we feel pretty good about working with them.
Okay, because I'm excited about it. I'd love to see it go. We've talked about it, and it's time to move, you know, so I would be in favor of it. But, the only question, I just want to make sure that we're on solid ground with how the proposal originally went in and how we're using the money. I just want to, as long as we're on solid ground there.
Yeah, Terry, that was going to be kind of my next question is, you know, so, and I may want to get an opinion from town council on the original approval of, was it interpreted to be conditioned upon the receipt of the Mass Trails grant? Or if you're going to be able to complete essentially the same project you're proposing without the Mass Trails grant, then I would say that certainly matches the spirit of what was approved. I just want, like Terry said, we just want to make sure that we're not setting ourselves up for any kind of tripwires. Have you guys already had an opinion on that at all? Dan, have you asked anyone? Or Andrew?
I didn't check with town council. My understanding of the Community Preservation Act doesn't conflict with our ability to use this for similar purposes outside of a matching grant, but I completely support checking with town council.
Okay. And I'm happy to, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Andrew.
I was just going to say, I'm happy to work with Dan, or to check with town council as well, get an opinion from her. The interesting thing, so there's the application itself, which does mention the matching funds, but then I notice on the town warrant, it just says Rail Trail Phase 1 without much, I don't know, Dan, is there any other information that's voted on when town meeting appropriates the funding. It's just a blanket statement.
There was a packet we provided with it, or a presentation that might have mentioned that it was a matching grant, but it wasn't in the warrant, I don't think.
I mean,
Well, either way, we certainly want to be on good legal ground if we do this. So
it's frankly less of a legal issue than it is, I think, sort of almost a fiduciary one on our part, that, you know, we approve projects subject to certain stipulations. In some cases, they're soft and ambiguous, arguably, that's okay. But if we say we funded one thing and then we spend the money on something different that's out of scope, I think that's sort of the role that we primarily play. I just don't remember on this, to tell you the truth. I mean, I think we should go back and look at the application and see how it was written in the application.
It is, and I've gone back and looked, and it was, it was set as a matching grant, and I think it was conditioned upon, certainly how I presented it at both the select board and the finance committee, as that the two were linked. The question then becomes is, if you're able to still complete the spirit of the project that you were hoping to complete with last year's funding within the same funding amount, then to me, that's a non-issue. But I'd like to, again, I think we all agree in the spirit of this, that it's still phase one of a rails trail, but we want to make sure that, nothing bites us down the road.
And I'll just add one more thing. I don't want to muddy the waters any further, but so just to your point, Mr. Chair, just, in terms of completing the project the same way, even though this is not a matching grant. It remains to be seen, because we anticipated that the total project cost, the combination of the CPC funding allocation and the grant that we would have gotten, could have funded the whole design. And it's becoming less apparent that we could do that with that amount of money, that it might cost more than that. So I'm just saying, this is funding an initial phase to get us started in the process. So I just want to be very clear about that.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think I have anything else on this, if no one else does. If we can get, Dan, maybe it's a quick opinion from town council on that, just to make sure we're in the lines before anyone signs up with a contract and spends any dollars, and we have to worry about reimbursements. And at least that way you'll know if for whatever reason there's an issue with it, then you have a different direction to come back, perhaps with a new application. And I know it delays things, but at least it puts everyone on solid footing. Okay.
That sounds good. Dan, we can pursue an opinion from town council. That's not a problem.
Yep.
Okay.
Sounds good.
All right. I've got nothing else. Andrew, you good?
I'm good. Thank you very much for everyone's time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate
Thank
your
you.
work on that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you,
Okay.
Andrew.
Take care.
All right. Okay. Next up, we discussed last meeting getting some updates on quarterly reports on outstanding projects. Dan, you want to jump in a little bit on some of the outreach you've been able to do and some of the responses you've gotten?
Yeah. So to start, I'll say I probably got started on this too late, and I didn't hear back from most of the projects, and a lot of these are out, older projects that haven't been active in a long time, and we were checking to see, hey, are these complete? And a lot of the original applicants either aren't with the town anymore or in different positions, and so I got a lot of responses that were, deferring to someone else. I did include in the packet just a kind of unofficial update I got from the people who did respond. So in 2015, the town planner at the time, who was no longer with the town, had applied for funding to build the Mills to Hills Trail, framed as multi-use trails phase 1, requesting $176,000. The original route of the trail was not used, I believe, because of the path through the wetlands. And so avoiding certain wetlands. They didn't need to build as much boardwalk and bridge as anticipated or have to go through as much permitting. And so there is $54,500 left over in the account, but the current town planning director, Gene Enright, has said that the project can be closed out and is complete. If you want more information on that, I can certainly request that. But she had received, basically taken this project on after the former town planner had left. Do you want me to go through all of them, or do you want questions on each one as we go through?
I mean, it's probably, if you go, there's only 4 of them, so if you want to give us a quick update, that'd be great, yeah.
Yep. So Stevens Estate Trails, Friends of North Andover Trails had requested $12,500. $7,684 remain. Glenn from Fonat had indicated that this project is complete and that the lumber costs were a lot less than expected, which is why there is so much money left over. He did say that they could use additional signage there. I would have to double check the application to see if that's applicable. He had said they might use other funding for that, but if there's $7,000 left over and we're, so interested in having signs on CBC properties now, that it might be, worth bringing Glenn in to talk about that. To you guys, the Sear Boardwalk has its full appropriation still in the count of $14,720. Glenn is not the primary person working on that, so he had to check with other people about why all that money is still in the account, but that boardwalk is mostly complete. There is some finishing touches that need to be done, but he's finding out why they haven't invoiced the town or requested disbursement at this point. And the restoration of historical records for the town clerk from fiscal year 2013 has just $3,351 remaining out of $40,000. We've had 2 different town clerks since that project started, and Lori Burzlaff indicated that she had previously requested that this project be closed out and that it is complete.
Okay. So I guess of 2 of the 4, it looks like 2 are asking to be closed out. Definitely that'd be Project 1333, which is the Mills Hill Trail, and Project 1314, which is the historical records. Could I get a motion, please?
I'll motion, but I just want to make a comment.
Yeah.
Before we do.
Yeah.
Now?
No, go ahead, yeah.
I'm just, that thing sat around for a long time, never really was going anywhere. It was really nice when Jean came in, she picked it up and just finished it. It was one of those things, kind of like the rail trail that just kept sitting around, and finally we got it done, and it's really used a lot. It goes by my store, and it's a great project, and it was nice that she came in and finally finished it, and it looks great.
That's great. Okay.
Okay.
Good. Any other comments on these 2 projects, 1333 and 1314, to be closed out?
I'll second the motion, though.
It's motion made, seconded by John. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Call it unanimous? Okay, thank you. Dan, just following up on quarterly project reports, I think we had in our last meeting the goal to at least have an update from everyone by the November meeting, so we got some more time on that. And, again, just let us know if you're having any trouble getting responses, and we can shake the trees a little bit for you as well.
Yep. I will note I got these emails later, but Ridgewood Cemetery is pulling together information for more detailed reports on their projects. They've, I think, 4 open with us that have been pretty active. So they're going to send reports, and the new fire chief is digging up information and is going to send photos for the restoration of the fire steamer, which is still actively being worked on, but does the only other information on that I received.
Great. Okay, thank you. All right, next item agenda, our application, which we discussed last meeting a little bit. I think we made the necessary tweaks at the last meeting, and one of the discussions we're going to have is regarding sign exhibits Rick, can we give us a kind of quick update on your discussions with
Yep.
Dawn?
So I had a discussion with Dawn from Dawn Sign Tech, and I asked her to develop some sign templates similar to what we came up with for Glenny Woodlot. So I'm still waiting for her to provide that information. She's also going to provide pricing information, so we have somewhere of a framework to provide pricing in the application. I expect that I would have that possibly as early as tomorrow, but
Great.
if not, probably next week.
Okay,
And I told Dan that I would pass that information on to him.
great. Okay. I think that the plan, as we discussed last meeting, is to have that attached to the application so that it becomes a part of every project where applicable, and something we can vote on at the time and make sure that it's well established and built in each project budget.
Yeah, so what I asked her for was just typical projects, like a building or a historic building project, a sign size that would be applicable to that type of project, something that she's done in the past. And she had sent me some pictures, photographs before, so that's how it's gonna be. It's probably gonna be the same idea as the Glenny Woodlot sign,
Yep.
but in a size and style that would be more appropriate for a building. And so we'll have a couple of different frameworks with pricing.
Excellent. Okay, great. Dan, anything else on the application at this time? Are we live on the website yet, or no?
Not yet. I was going to wait until, we got confirmation from this meeting, and it would probably be helpful to have the sign information too. I made every suggestion from our last meeting official in the application, which was mainly completed. I just added description of how to get in a butters list and details on the signage, which reference designs and prices. And so once we have that information from Dawn Sign Tech, I can put all this together and it can go on the website.
Great. Excellent. Okay. Any other questions regarding applications? Hopefully this is the last we talk about signs, Rick.
The next time we're gonna bring a picture of the Glenny Woodlot sign.
Actually, looking at the minutes, I think you said that last meeting too.
I did. I did pick it up. I picked up the hardware, and I hope this weekend I will get it up. And, I will shoot you a picture.
I'm just kidding, just kidding. All right, next item is another follow-up from last meeting. That's regarding this committee leadership, discussion of a process and vote on this year's leadership. Just to kind of quickly recap, we had some discussions around a handful of topics, and I think, Bill has kind of formulated an idea, a thought as to a process that we could try to adopt as a part of the committee. Has something that's repetitive year over year and addresses, kind of our goals for how we want to operate, and that's in our meeting packet now. For everyone to take a look at. Bill, I don't know if you want to kind of run through it for everybody.
Sure. Yeah. So essentially, what I was trying to do was to say, like, okay, what are we seeking when we have, what do we need from committee leadership? What are the roles of the chair of the committee? And how do we work towards, I think what we were talking about last time was, how do we work towards sort of a regular rotation and the idea that really we're a more process-driven style of leadership and more collaborative, and which would come from more turnover and more chance that any given member would serve in a leadership position on the committee over the course of their career on committee. So, essentially, I put this together. I can share it.
Yeah,
on the screen?
Yeah, why don't you share that up on the screen? Bill, that'd be great.
Okay. All right. Okay, tell me if it's tell me if that's big enough. Does that work?
I think that should work for the screen. I mean, we'll have a little bit of a harder time seeing it here. John, I'm happy to share a screen with you, John, if you want. But at least it's up there for the meeting, for the record. So,
Okay. So essentially, I figured we first kind of have to say what the chair does. So I basically said, these things that, setting the meeting agendas, establishing the schedule, presiding over the meetings, approving payments, representing the CPC in non-public negotiations. And then I think we had talked the other day too about, how it's probably best practice to have another person there, either a professional from the town or an additional member of the CPC present. And then working with the town council, I'll have to edit that, to negotiate any easements, conservation restrictions, or other legal instruments to which the CPC would be a signatory. And then I would said, bringing those instruments back and signing as a representative of the CDC. And then to talk about the vice chair, I would say the vice chair would be the presiding officer in meetings in the absence of the chair due to, extenuating circumstances or just inability to attend a meeting for whatever reason. And then in prolonged absence of the chair, you could imagine.
Bill, did we lose you? Right when he gets to the good part, my prolonged absence.
Is it just, right? He's frozen, right? Not all of us?
I think so, yeah.
All right.
I think the internet go down in San Diego. Okay, well, I guess I'll continue since
He's in California, right?
He's in California right now, yeah. So for the vice chair, in the event of a prolonged absence, where the chair would make note of that in writing, the vice chair would assume the existing powers of the chair. I think that's probably how we operate. And then we'll get to, the process. Go ahead.
Right now, is it in writing that we do that, or is it just assumed?
It is not. There's nothing in our bylaws that kind of direct it. It's really kind of been somewhat
Because
informal.
we could be in a sticky situation if someone just disappears and we don't get something in writing, then we're stuck. So I don't know if we want to say in writing, just because I'm afraid if, I don't know, you're hit by a bus.
And incapacitated, exactly. I agree with you, Terry.
Correct. And listen, I think one thing that the bylaws do say is, we're allowed to make our own rules, right? So in the event of a situation like that, the committee is not paralyzed. I wouldn't presume that any committee is paralyzed.
We don't have to go to the legislature to get the approval to do something different.
To do something from the bylaws?
Yeah.
Exactly, jeez. Anyway, I guess we'll kind of go through this, and then we'll go through additional questions. Bill sent me a text saying his computer just rebooted, so hopefully
Yeah,
he'll
me
join
too.
back in. So elections would be the second meeting of each fiscal year, so I guess that would be this meeting that we're at now. Nominations made at the first meeting. Chair chosen by plurality, and vice chair chosen by the second plurality. So I guess, okay, so as this is written, I'll let Bill clarify. It sounds like whoever gets the second most votes becomes vice chair. Is that, I guess, the idea?
Don't we normally, though, under, a Robert's rule or normal fashion in that we do things, you nominate a chair, then you nominate a vice chair. You
right.
don't-
Yeah, I think that's what he meant.
I mean, I don't,
Yeah.
right, John?
By
I don't
second
think we should
plurality.
be
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, so I'm misreading.
doing
that
that weird
That's-
voting.
Yeah, no, it would be, well, it's how they usually vote for
So when
president and vice
He's
president.
talking about an order of the voting.
Or the voting, chair first, vice chair second, which is, that would be.
Oh, all
pretty
right, that
standard,
makes-
yes. Okay. Well, whether that's what Bill intended, I think that's what we're getting at out of this. And then Bill made suggestions for the rotation of every 2 to 3 years. And if a majority believe the chair should serve more than 3 years, they can reaffirm that for an additional year. And the vice chair should be chosen as a successor upon the completion. So it sounds like at the time you're voting for vice chair, you're also voting that person for chair in the future is what Bill is presenting here now, so.
I'd like to make a comment if I could, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, so I was gonna go through this and go around with it, because I assume that there's a number of comments I think we probably ought to have with this, while
Okay.
Bill's rebooting, but, May Tracy, I'll go ahead and let you start.
I don't like putting, so I'm a big fan of term limits in general. However, I don't like saying that, you know, we have a vice chair this year and in 3 years that person should automatically be chair. You know, this particular committee can continue to turn over and over and over. And those folks may not be there, and you may have a different vice chair every year. So just the end part of, I love what you know, what Bill has done. I think the overview is great. I don't want to be held to, you know, vice chair today is definitely chair in 3 years, because I don't know, someone new could come on next year with all sorts of experience that the committee chooses would be actually the best chair. So I just don't want it to be absolutely in stone. I love the spirit of this. Again, I'm a big believer in, you know, term limits, turnover. I think the more you bring back to the committee as a whole, the more transparent we are, you know, all of that is a positive thing. And the more of us that actually know what happens behind the scenes and those types of things is only beneficial to the committee and the community as a whole. I just don't want to be held to chair definitely next year or the year. I think you're understanding what I'm saying.
Yeah, there's, I guess, a lot of things that could come up. And Bill, looks like you're back on. To kind of to your point of that, Tracy, you know, you may elect someone as vice chair. I'd be vice chair for, you know, 3 years and have a lousy attendance record at the time that they're vice chair.
Right.
And that person assumes the chair. I hear what you're saying in that. Bill, now you've rejoined us. I went through the rest of the topics we discussed, and we were just starting to get into questions. So I don't think you've missed a ton. So. Yeah,
no, thanks. Sorry, bad technical difficulties. But yeah, I mean, that's, to Tracy's point, that's the part I was challenged by, because, you know, we have heard that it's not an easy job to sort of jump into. And so the question is, how do you, I think what the question you're trying to solve for is, how do you make it so that you can have a regular rotation of chairs and also kind of keep everything humming, you know, keep the wheels turning and keep everything moving. And I guess it comes down to, you know, is there a way you can improve the documentation and sort of process behind the leadership, in terms of, you know, there's more sort of walking through the leadership function, you know, and on a regular basis, or, you know, or is it just you know, just do the hard cutover? Because I wasn't saying that it was like, that's where I was having the hard time trying to write it up, because I was trying to say, you know, you want to make sure that you have this knowledge transfer kind of going on over a period of time, as opposed to as a, you know, event every year. And so how do you best accomplish that? You know, and it is very hard to write it up. I agree 100% with Tracy that it'd be kind of hard to say, we're going to have an election today. I mean, that was kind of where the logic, once I started writing, that's where the logic took me. But I understand the weakness of the point there. And I also think, you know, by having sort of regular elections, you're also sort of, you know, you can correct, right? Like, you're not bound. I don't think you're bound. It's a question of, you know, you have a fresh decision every year. But the question is, you know, the vice chair is just there to preside when the chair's not there. That's fine. Yeah.
I'm totally with the spirit of all of this, and completely agree that, you know, for all intents and purposes, a vice chair should ascend. And a vice chair, you know, should be privy almost to everything that the chair does, but the committee should. This committee, I have to say, since I've been on it, has, you know, really turned over, yourself as well. I think Terry and John can even say in particular, in the last 5 years, we've really seen a turnover here. Institutional knowledge, we have to recognize is huge.
Yeah, I would agree.
And important. but that institutional knowledge should be handed off. Yeah, so I'm with you 1,010%. I just don't want anything particularly, written in stone.
What do some other folks in the room think? We can't,
Yeah.
right now online, we can't see the feed from the feed of the room.
No worries, yeah, I was going to go around and ask for some additional comment. I think, Tim, you had a question or a comment?
Yeah, my experience in the town government has been with the finance committee, and what I've experienced, Bill, over the several years is that there is always the intent of a chair being in spot for a solid year, but you're still getting up to strength and speed, and 2 years seems to be a good unwritten kind of procedure or rule that happens unless the chair is a real screw up. And to the spirit of what you're trying to say here, the vice chair, you want someone in place so that they are mentored, they are grooming, so that they are learning to perhaps step in the role of immediately or in the future when time comes. But it's never been in writing, at least in the finance committee, where that happened. It was just sort of unspoken amongst everybody in the committee what the next step was, what the next persons were. And I can tell you that right now, the vice chair, typically, there will be the next chair. And 2 years out.
Jack, any comments from you?
I agree with pretty much everything that Tracy said. I think that to mandate it in that the vice chair will succeed the chair is maybe a little restrictive, although that is the natural progression. I think what might be missing is, okay, what if something happens to the chair? Okay, the vice chair can ascend, but then do we get a replacement vice chair with an ad hoc election? How does that work? I mean, it might be just a matter of putting another bullet point in, but what happens if something unusual happens? Someone moves out of town, the chair moves out of town, or the vice chair moves out of town. How do we deal with that?
That's a good question. I would assume we would just follow Robert's rules, though, and Dan can probably. I mean, from my own experience, I would assume the following meeting you'd have new elections. But I'm not really sure. That's why I'm a little concerned about too much in writing. Again, I agree 1,010% with the spirit. Having it in writing is the only thing, because nobody ever knows. God forbid someone's hit by a bus or what have you. So I would assume under normal circumstances, being on other committees and boards and what have you, when somebody leaves, then the next meeting you just have new elections.
That's typically how it would work.
Could be fair.
Right.
Yeah.
So I would think we would just follow, a Robert's rule or what have you. But again, I think I fully understand where Bill's coming from and support the spirit of this.
Okay, Terry, you have any comments?
On that particular item?
On any of it right now?
Okay.
Yeah, keep us moving
On
forward.
that, I agree that I don't think it should be in writing. I think it should just be a natural thing, and that's what I would want to do. And then the other thing is, was there a reason you picked the second meeting of the year for the elections?
Bill?
I don't think he can hear us. He texted me, and he's having a hard time hearing us.
My thought on that, we're kind of into it now,
Yeah.
So I was thinking maybe the election should be the meeting after town meeting. And that would be like the beginning of the new year, you know what I'm saying? That was my only thought. I mean, it's not a big deal either way, but I just think it'd be tougher to switch in the middle.
Terry, like every other committee at the fiscal year, at the beginning of the fiscal year, when you start a new year.
Yeah, I guess my only challenge with that is things happen during the summer or whatever, that longer hiatus before we start the next year. I think.
So
what
ours
Bill-
would be, what, September?
I was, yeah, the first meeting. I think what Bill did here was he was hoping to have nominations the first meeting and election the second meeting. I think we're a small enough body that it could be done in one meeting. I don't see why it would, need to be prolonged.
I think
I
the
just
first
like it
meeting
to
would
be
be
a
more
starting
appropriate.
point.
Yeah, no, I agree. Rick, any comments?
I agree with what Tracy said and Terry has echoed about the having it in writing. I'd rather not see that in writing
Okay.
as a HUD. And I do agree with Tim that I think it takes you 2 years to really get up to full speed in that position to really understand it.
You don't want to have it right.
No, and I don't, I'm not saying it in
I
writing,
second
but
that,
I'm
Rick.
just echoing from what I know,
Yeah.
that it takes a couple of years to get up to speed in a position till you're really efficient at it.
So here it says 2 or 3 years. Are we
Yeah.
talking about 2 or 3?
It says, again, if you were to put something in writing, you wouldn't have it be or you'd make a decision on it.
There's an election every year, right, at the very beginning of the year?
Right.
Yeah.
3 years.
Yeah.
2 years.
Yeah.
1 year, you're out.
Well, I think Bill did put that in down there that, you could go for another year, fourth year.
Sure.
Listen, you also have to have enough time left in your term appointment at that time. So that does also get tricky, right? You vote someone for
Right.
3 years, and they got a year left on their appointment.
I mean, I think it helps a lot to have the responsibilities of the chair laid out in writing, because if someone is the vice chair, they can
Great.
see in writing what they're going to assume as responsibilities.
I agree, and I'm going to get to my comments in a second, but I would like to give John a chance to speak as the long-serving chair. And I think in a lot of ways, we talked about, the vice chair learning under the chair. We kind of done the opposite way, right? Having the vice chair here to mentor new chairs who come on. So I'm curious as to some of your thoughts, John.
Yeah, I mean, I think the comments that Tracy made about institutional memory and passing the knowledge through the committee, in my mind, is very important. I mean, the formality, we'll get it right, we'll get it fair, whether we write everything down or not. I think it's a lot of common sense, but I think it's, how do we collectively, with new members, get them up to speed, understand things, and, I think the big takeaway for me is that I probably need to do a little bit more with you on that as well, and I think that's, understanding the history, the context, some of the dilemmas that we have, and so forth is probably the best way, so.
Yeah, and again, not to go back and forth too much with us, I've always been able to reach out to you or other members of the committee, and I think we've operated very well as a committee in that sense. So I do one thing that I do have an issue with that I don't know that we have the authority to do would be number 7 under powers of the chair, and that's bringing legal instruments back to the CPC for approval. That is actually something I did discuss with Suzanne last year, that we had some discussions about this in particular. And I don't know that we have the right to approve the final legal instruments after we've already approved recommendation of a budget. I'll get further clarification on that.
Yeah,
Mr.
I think the
Mr.
issue
Chair. Oh.
is more along the lines of, there may be a situation where the legal agreement, you want to ensure that the legal agreement includes what we
What
thought
was-
it was
yeah.
going to include. But I think the way you get that is it's the ongoing process, working through it, and once you get the final version, I think pretty much you got to rely on the chair to come up with something that is correct.
Tracy, you're going to say
Miss-
something? Yeah.
Yeah, that I think is probably, for me, one of the most important things is that before the chair signs, the entire committee should be able to take a look at that legal instrument. And I think where some of past angst, shall we say, among the committee has been because the final legal documents never came back to the committee for review. Not that we may or may not have the right to approve or disapprove it, but they weren't even, the committee never even saw them.
Okay. Well,
And they were signed and moved along, and then when it came back, for instance, hey, what about the parking lot? Well, the parking lot was never even in the final agreement, because the final agreement never came back to the committee for anyone to even see. So for me, number 7 is actually probably the most important, that before the chair And I do believe that we as a committee can say the chair can sign or not sign. Again, I'm not a lawyer, I'm,
No,
you know,
no,
I'm
no.
just, I think, you know what I'm saying is that a lot of, some of the problems have been that final agreements were signed, and then when reviewed 2, 3, 4 years later, they weren't what the committee actually thought they agreed to.
I'll get further clarification from town council on that, just to make sure we're not overstepping our bounds. And again,
I don't see any reason why the committee as a whole could not see a final agreement. Why would you, you know what I mean?
I will say, there's one logistical challenge. They come out in the summer, after we've had our last meeting.
Right, but if
So,
we present, part of the problem we've had, part of the reason this is even here on the agenda this evening, is because for years, we as a committee have presented certain things to town meeting. And then years later, we find out that's not what the final agreement actually says.
understood.
Point made, that's all.
No,
Thank you.
example for, for the grant agreements that I had to sign this year after the last approval, and those were done in July, so, we would, if the
No
committee's.
reason you can't email him to the, individually, that doesn't violate open meeting law, that doesn't. I'm not saying that we have to formally say okay, or formally vote on it. You're right, I don't think we would have that power. But again, I think this is on the agenda this evening because for many, many years, we have put forth at town meeting one thing, and final agreements have ended up being something very different.
Understood.
That's the point, you know what I mean? So thank you. Sorry.
No, point taken.
Thank you.
Okay. So what do we want to do with what we have right now? And I think that I'm getting a sense of maybe a little bit of reluctance to put it.
I kind of feel bad that Bill wrote this and he's not hearing us.
Yeah, I'm
Oh, okay.
I'm back.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm back. But essentially, I guess there's this kind of, I look at it and think there's kind of a couple different ways we could go. Like, when you start looking at it and you start thinking about it, you think like, hey, do we need to produce a bylaw? And and that's something that's certainly different and more formal than what we've had. But lots of committees have bylaws. The finance committee has a set of bylaws, and that's a longer term project. We're not going to knock that out in one sort of meeting. A second approach you could take is to say, let's have some guidelines, which we would just say like, hey, these are the operating guidelines we're using, and this is the way we think about things. And that's a little bit, less formal, easier to change and develop and so forth. And the third way is we could just have, an understanding of what we want, right? And that would just be, hey, we had a discussion and we decided we think a good term for the chair is 2 years, and we should be looking to turn over every 2 years or every 3 years. And then we just operate that way. And as long as we, essentially, as long as we had an election every year for chair, we would be checking in on that understanding, because the group of people in this room will change because people will come off and come on and so forth. So, I mean, those are kind of three approaches you could take. I'd probably go for the middle, sort of guideline approach, but I wouldn't have a problem with the other two approaches either.
Okay. Any other comments?
In general, I like everything except the last section of this thing,
The last section.
where it talks about terms. And I just think, because there's an annual election, you let the process work. And it's just a general understanding that it's going to take a couple of years for a chair to really put in its,
get at everything they can and do, and it's also common understanding too, that a vice chair there is to be mentored, learn the ropes. I don't think there's needed to put it in writing though. That's my opinion.
So your opinion would be the general understanding of the discussion that we've discussed tonight?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I don't know if, I'm not sure if I was clear with you, John, but you kind of made it sound like the way it was going, you know, I mean, you would just go along with the elections and the vice, it seemed to work out, right? I don't know what you were saying when you said that,
Well, no, I guess my point was from at least, I mean, whether you have a lot of formality in picking the chair and how long you want the chair to be there, kind of like, I think it'll follow its level. I mean, I think the question is, as I hear everybody talk, is this formal rule of making the vice chair the chair, I don't think everybody's in agreement with. I think you pick the chair, you run it for 2 years. I think the idea that it's limited, so that's fine, and we rotate it, and we also try to mentor and guide people. I think that those principles, I think, are the important thing, and that's really what it is. It's that if somebody new comes in, I mean, the advantage with Tim is Tim's been involved in town stuff, but what if the next person came in, had no experience at all? That's where you'd want to bring them up to speed, and, in your case, you came in not knowing, and how do we do that? How do we bring people? I think that's really the key thing.
and maybe.
Well, wouldn't
even if somebody
one of the
isn't
ways to do that, oh, I'm sorry.
Just a second.
It's
Tracy.
hard, I'm sorry. I feel like I interrupt because it's choppy.
No worries, just give it a quick second.
If somebody who's not a vice chair wants to follow go to some of the meetings and whatever, they have that opportunity. And I think it's nice just to let the board members know a meeting with, this group tonight, that, or whatever, if you'd like to attend, see how it's presented, see how we do it. I think it's a good idea if somebody wants to, so it's not, if somebody else has an interest in running and wants to learn, there's an opportunity for them to learn.
That's fair. Tracy?
Honestly, I'm gonna feed right off of what Terry just said. If we have a chair that brings everything back to the committee and we all know what's happening and we all have an opportunity to, without breaking open meeting laws, of course, we can't have quorum and what have you. But if, just as Terry said, the chair should let us know what's happening so that we can be involved, and then it's not only the vice chair that's up to speed, it's all the committee members up to speed, and we all know what's happening, and leadership will follow in an organic way as it should.
Agreed, and I think, that's one of those things that doesn't need to necessarily be written, right? That's the point of our meeting every month, and, if it's for everyone on this committee to know what I know, the meetings I've had, and what I brought up is, because, can't make any decisions without the committee in that regard, so, to me, that feels, again, not obvious, but an obligation, as chair, to do that, so. Okay, so I'm not hearing a motion to adopt these formally. Am I?
No, but I think the conversation has been great.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, so how do we want to proceed for this year? And I think what I did here is that there's a sense of regular elections.
Can we, if it's not on the agenda, we can't.
It is on it was on the agenda. A vote, leadership vote was on the agenda, so.
Oh, it was?
Yep. To immediately follow this discussion, so.
I move to nominate you as chairman.
Second.
All those in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, any nominations for vice chair?
John?
Terry nominates John.
I'll second
Do I have a
that.
second? Second by Rick. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Okay. I have them as unanimous. Thank you.
The only thing I think we should schedule when the next one will be. What do we think would be the next good time for an election? I think that's the only thing I'd like to see us kind of say at this meeting, and then, so we know from, I think you were gone when we were talking about, well, it was my thought. I thought the second meeting of January was, maybe we're already in the middle of things. I was trying to think of a time to have an election where things were just kind of starting out. I suggested the meeting after the town meeting. Somebody else said maybe September, because the summer months get kind of hard for a new president, chairman to jump in. I'd just like to get everybody's thoughts.
Yeah, I think we operate on the calendar year, or on the, almost in the school year calendar largely, rather than the fiscal year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So September's good with me. I mean,
I think,
The first meeting,
I think it would be tough to come in as chair and do all the agreements for a project cycle that you weren't as involved in. So it's almost like September is good because you pick up the next fiscal year projects. The first or second meeting, you have that.
Here, do we need to make a motion
I
on
don't
that?
think, do we have to vote on it, or we
Probably
can just?
not.
Yeah.
first meeting?
First meeting.
First
Yep.
meeting's good.
Yep. And this year, in this case, the second meeting this year. Okay, any other discussion on this topic?
No.
Okay, excellent, thank you. Next item on our agenda was the discussion of the November meeting and having it be kind of an open meeting to try and generate some project support, something we discussed at length last time. Dan, we had talked about getting a mailer out in the quarterly tax bill, and I think your comment was that's not going to come until January, correct?
That's what I was told.
Yeah, which would be a little late for our application deadline of February, so,
I think we can probably still, include mention of it in that, but it's definitely not happening before the November meeting or anything like that.
I think that's fine. I think one of the things that we did discuss, was poor attendance at previous open meetings that we've had in the past and trying to get people to come. So, but we did, I think, since last meeting from the committee of, in that quarterly tax bill, a reminder of CPC and a reminder of, the tax dollars at work of, hey, we funded this project, that project, or sorry, you, the taxpayers, funded this project or that project. So Dan, if you wouldn't mind making sure we know what that process is so we can get a section of that of that flyer and be ready for January. We don't have to do anything on it, I don't think, for tonight's meeting.
Yep.
Okay. Speaking of November, I have been in touch with Brad Wakeman of the North Andover Improvement Society, who had reached out previously, I think I mentioned it last meeting, about coming in to discuss some of what they have planned going on around the old center, and he's going to join us for our November meeting to have a discussion on what they're up to. I don't know if they're putting any applications forward this year or not, but perhaps that may lead to discussion.
Just a little bit by way of background, the North Andover Improvement Society is over 100 years old. In fact, it was in 1880 it started, and before the trustees of the reservation, and before the one in Andover. And at one time, it had a very active role. It was very much involved with taking the houses, cleaning up the old center, and taking the houses off and putting them elsewhere and so forth. And then it kind of became a little bit more of Andover probably the last 15 or 20 years. And Brad wants to resurrect it as a land trust primarily, but also for other civic improvements and so forth. So it's a great idea, and I think it fits in with the whole spirit of what the Historical Society is doing now with the renovation of the building and so forth. And so I think it's an exciting what he's trying to do, and he works very closely with Glenn on the Trails Committee as well. So I think it'd be a nice story.
I'm excited to have him in. And I guess we can advertise that meeting as an open meeting as well. Dan, I don't know if there's a way for us to get any of the word out for anyone else who does want to come in and discuss projects or potential projects and get feedback from the committee. And again, we haven't had to do a whole lot of that in the past, but I think we're open to discussing that kind of stuff with folks to make sure that they're putting forward the best applications possible. if we see obvious flaws. I think that was the intent of that for the November meeting.
Mhm. Yep, so I was going to touch base with recurring applicants to see who plans on applying this year and encourage them to come in next meeting just to convey what their, plans might be, not trying. I'll make sure everyone knows they're not here to give a full 20-minute presentation or whatever, but for the, public hearing to just hear what people's plans are for the future.
Got it. Okay. Can we also get a posting out on social media through the town's Twitter handle?
Yes, absolutely. That is, I've already spoken to Sarah Brush, who's the social media manager, about that. It hasn't gone out yet, but
That's fine.
She's aware. And I also spoke to the Master Plan Implementation Committee because they've been prioritizing goals over the last year, and encourage them to at least have someone present to discuss what their priorities are. I don't know that they'll have someone putting forward a project, but just, conveying what they think should be prioritized based on the master plan.
So you think they will be able to get someone here for November?
Yeah, they have a new chair who's very active, and I think at least he will come. And I think there's a few boards represented on the implementation committee who I ask people to convey to their own boards that they should encourage people to come. So working on getting the word out.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Who is the affordable housing point person?
On our committee?
Well, who would come to that open meeting, for example?
Well, Tracy's the
Tracy.
representative here on our
Okay.
committee, and it would be, we've had in the past had Maggie Clary come and discuss.
Maggie Clear is the executive director. If you're talking about the Affordable Housing Trust, that would be Lori Burzlaff.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, both who've come before the committee in recent years. It's, certainly, the Housing Authority has a number of projects that we've funded recent years. So. Okay. I've got nothing else. There's nothing else
One
to do.
more item.
Yes, please.
As a newbie, I've been going around, especially since I got time being retired, going around to look at all the different projects that we have a listing of, and I've been using the map that's on the, don't use that map. It's embarrassing as heck when you,
On the website?
on the website, it's not accurate.
Interesting.
Because when you zoom in, first of all, it's hard to zoom in. You get the wrong addresses for a house on Andover Street for the Drummond Playground. So,
Okay.
it's a pretty interesting exercise on my part, so I plan on coming back with some suggestions and recommendations.
Good. I was just going to nominate you for a subcommittee.
You got it. 'Cause it's been fun.
Okay.
But it's also eye-opening relative to what you find and what you're not finding, so.
Good to know, yeah. Yeah, Tim, we discussed that a lot in the last couple of years. Our intent was to try and get all the project documents up on the website and everything there as a resource for everyone, so.
I love data, I love analytics, but it's just like, it was embarrassing when I was taking pictures, because the idea is, take a picture of the property if you can. And I took a picture and I'm like, well, this isn't right. I said, okay, close enough as a house, must be the property behind her that she's drumming the field. And she was there, and it was embarrassing conversation, so I apologized and I said, we'll fix this.
No worries. All right, good, and we'll look forward to having that on a future agenda. Can I get another motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Made by Terry, second by Rick. All those in favor?
Aye.
Bye.
Aye.
Thank you very much, everyone. We are adjourned.
Have a great weekend.